Picture this. The year is 1720. You are the captain of a merchant vessel, your hold packed with spices and silver, your crew tired from weeks at sea. Then, on the horizon, a black smudge appears. It grows, and as it closes the distance, you see it clearly. A flag, black cloth, a white skull grinning above two crossed bones. You have cannons. You have 50 armed men standing ready. And yet, the moment that flag catches the wind, the sword falls from your hand. You surrender without firing a single shot. Why? How does a piece of cloth win a war before it even begins? Today, we're going to dig into the psychology, the fear, and the strategy that turned the Jolly Roger into one of the deadliest weapons of the 18th century. It wasn't just a flag. It was a death sentence that ruled the seas, and it never had to fire a single cannon to do it. Before we go deeper into the dark secrets behind the Jolly Roger, if you love these hidden stories from the Golden Age of Piracy, hit that subscribe button below and tap the bell. We bring you a new untold story from the high seas every week. Let's get into it. Before we talk about how the flag worked, we need to talk about where it came from, because almost everything popular culture tells you about the Jolly Roger is either wrong or wildly oversimplified. The name itself is a mystery historians still argue about. One leading theory traces it back to the French phrase Joli Rouge, meaning pretty red, which over generations of English sailors mangled into Jolly Roger. Another theory points toward Old Roger, an Old English nickname for the devil himself, suggesting the flag was meant to announce that the devil had come calling on your ship personally. A third theory connects it to Tamil and South Asian pirates operating in the Indian Ocean, whose flags and reputations may have influenced the naming conventions European sailors later adopted. The honest answer is that no single origin story has ever been definitively proven. What we do know with total certainty is that by the early 1700s, the name and the symbol were already firmly attached to one specific meaning across every port from Nassau to Madagascar. Death is approaching, and you have a choice to make. And here's the detail almost nobody mentions. The skull and crossbones wasn't even a pirate invention. That symbol had already been used for centuries on tombstones, in ship's logs to mark a sailor's death, and in medical texts to warn of poison. Pirates didn't create the symbol of death. They borrowed it because everyone already understood exactly what it meant without a single word of explanation. That's the mark of genuinely effective branding. You don't invent fear from nothing. You hijack a symbol people already fear and put it to work for you. Pirates were not fools. They understood better than almost anyone else afloat exactly what a real fight cost. Cannon fire could crack a hull below the waterline and send a fortune in stolen cargo straight to the bottom of the ocean. Boarding actions could shred a crew that was already short-handed, with no way to replace lost men in the middle of the Atlantic. Every battle a pirate crew fought was a battle they could lose everything in: their prize, their ship, their lives, even if they technically won. So the smartest captains of the Golden Age stopped trying to win fights. They started trying to prevent them entirely. This is where the Jolly Roger earned its keep. It wasn't raised to announce a battle. It was raised to make a battle unnecessary. Here's how the logic worked, and it was ruthlessly simple. The moment that flag broke at the masthead, every sailor on the targeted ship understood they had exactly two options, and only two, ought one: surrender immediately, strike your colors, open your hold, and in the overwhelming majority of documented cases, your life would be spared. Pirates needed skilled labor more than they needed corpses. A surgeon, a carpenter, a navigator. These men were often invited to join the crew rather than harmed, because a functioning ship needed specialists a raiding party rarely carried enough of. To resist, fire even a single shot, and the black flag's unwritten promise evaporated instantly. instantly. What replaced it was a phrase every sailor in the Caribbean had heard whispered in port taverns long before they ever saw it in person. No quarter. It meant exactly what it sounds like. No mercy, no prisoners, no negotiation. Once the first shot left a barrel, ask yourself honestly, if you knew with total certainty that the ship bearing down on you had a documented reputation for keeping that promise, would you really gamble your life and your entire crew's lives to protect a cargo hold of sugar and rum? Most captains did the math in seconds, and that calculation, repeated across hundreds of encounters throughout the 1710s and 1720s, is precisely why so many prize ships fell without a single cannonball being fired. The flag did the fighting before the fighting could even start. This is also, in a strange way, one of the earliest large-scale examples of deterrence theory in action, centuries before modern military strategists gave the concept a formal name. The goal was never to inflict maximum damage. The goal was to make the threat of damage so credible, so consistent, and so well known that the other side surrendered before damage ever needed to be inflicted at all. A pirate captain with a fearsome reputation could, in theory, sail an entire career without ever needing to fire a shot in anger, because his flag had already fought and won the battle for him over and over in the minds of every captain who had ever heard his name. A plain black flag wasn't even the original version of this warning system, and the story of how it evolved is stranger than most people realize. Long before skulls and crossbones became the universal shorthand for piracy, sailors along the French and English Caribbean coasts feared a different color entirely, red. As we mentioned earlier, some historians trace the very name Jolly Roger back to that French phrase for pretty red. A red flag, sometimes called the bloody flag, carried one message and one message only: negotiations are over. From this point forward, there will be blood, and there will be no survivors, regardless of whether you surrender or not. Black, by contrast, was the flag of a choice still being offered. It said, surrender now, and you live. Red said, it's already too late, so you might as well fight, because you were dying either way. Once you understand that distinction, the black flag suddenly looks less like senseless savagery and more like calculated psychological leverage, a captain dangling mercy in front of his target for exactly as long as it served his purpose, and yanking it away the instant the target made the wrong move. But raising a generic flag was only step one. Pirate captains quickly realized that an unmarked skull and bones told a target almost nothing about who they were actually facing, and reputation was the entire engine driving this strategy. So flags evolved into something closer to a personal brand, unique enough that a merchant crew could recognize a specific captain's flag from the deck of their own ship and instantly recall every rumor they'd ever heard about that particular man. Christopher Moody flew a red flag featuring a white arm gripping a dagger positioned above a winged hourglass, a not so subtle reminder that time was literally running out for anyone who hesitated to surrender. Edward Lowe's flag showed a red skeleton on a black field, its arms outstretched as if reaching for the ship it was flying toward. Bartholomew Roberts, in one of his most infamous designs, flew a flag showing himself standing on top of two skulls, one labeled with the initials for a Barbadian's head and the other for a Martiniquan's head, a direct personal message of revenge aimed at the governors of those two specific islands who had aggressively hunted pirate crews. Stede Bonnet flew a flag with a skull above a heart pierced by a dagger, flanked by a long bone, a design meant to suggest that resistance would end not in a quick death, but a personal one. Every design choice was deliberate. Every symbol was engineered to be understood at a glance, from a distance, by frightened men who had only seconds to decide whether they were about to live or die. This is the part most documentaries skip entirely. Pirate flags functioned almost exactly like a modern company logo. They were consistent, they were recognizable, and they carried an implied promise about what would happen next, built entirely on the reputation of everything that flag had already done in encounters before this one. A merchant captain didn't need to know the name of the ship on the horizon. He only needed to recognize the pattern stitched into that cloth, and his memory would fill in the rest. Every story he'd ever heard, every warning whispered to him in port, all of it arriving in his mind in the 2 or 3 seconds it took to raise a spyglass. A flag can only terrify a target once that target is close enough to see it clearly. And here lies the problem every pirate captain faced. Merchant ships, upon spotting the Jolly Roger from a safe distance, would simply run. A fast merchant vessel with a head start could often outpace a pirate ship entirely, especially if the pirate crew was overloaded with plunder from a previous raid. So captains like Blackbeard and Bartholomew Roberts leaned on an older trick borrowed from naval warfare itself, sailing under false colors. A pirate ship might approach flying the flag of England, France, Spain, or the Dutch Republic, appearing to any observer as a perfectly ordinary vessel, simply sharing the same sea lane. Merchant crews, seeing a friendly or neutral flag, had little reason to change course or prepare for a fight. By the time the pirate ship closed to within striking range, close enough that outrunning it was no longer realistic, the false colors would come down and the Jolly Roger would go up in their place. That single moment, the switch from friendly flag to death's head, was engineered for maximum psychological shock. It stripped the target of the one advantage they might have used, distance, and replaced it instantly with the one thing the Jolly Roger was built to produce: the belief that resistance was now pointless. By the time a merchant crew fully understood what they were looking at, escape was already off the table, and surrender was the only rational move left on the board. Let's talk about Blackbeard, because no name from this era carried more weight on the open water. When his ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, anchored off a harbor with the Jolly Roger snapping in the wind above the deck, entire port towns reportedly went quiet with fear. He often didn't need to fight at all. According to numerous accounts from the period, local merchants and officials would send out food, medicine, and even gold simply to persuade him to move his ship along peacefully, a tribute paid not to stop an attack already underway, but to prevent one from ever beginning in the first place. That is the endpoint of psychological warfare done correctly. The threat becomes so well established that the target pays to avoid a confrontation that might never even have happened. Bartholomew Roberts, known across the Caribbean and West African coast as Black Bart, pushed this same principle to an almost industrial scale. Historical records credit him with capturing more than 400 ships during his relatively short career, an almost unbelievable number for a single pirate captain, and a significant share of those captures reportedly came with little or no resistance at all. His reputation, built and reinforced encounter after encounter, had become so absolute that many crews simply gave up the moment his colors were identified, sometimes before a single shot had even been loaded. Roberts didn't need overwhelming firepower on every single voyage. He needed a story that traveled faster than his ship did, and by every account, it did. Then there's Samuel Bellamy, captain of the Wider Galley, whose fleet reportedly captured over 50 ships in barely a year of active raiding, many of them without significant bloodshed, largely on the strength of a reputation that preceded him into nearly every harbor he approached. And Calico Jack Rackham, whose flag, a skull above two crossed swords rather than the more common crossed bones, became so recognizable throughout the Bahamas that the mere sighting of it reportedly caused smaller trading vessels to change course entirely rather than risk an encounter at all. In every one of these cases, the pattern repeats. The flag arrives first, the reputation arrives with it, and in a remarkable number of documented encounters, the fight itself never actually needs to happen. Here's the uncomfortable part of this story, the part that explains why the Jolly Roger's threat was never hollow. For the no quarter promise to keep working as a deterrent, it had to actually happen sometimes, and happen visibly enough that word would spread across ports, taverns, and shipping lanes. If a crew resisted, and pirates simply let them go afterward anyway, the entire system would collapse within a single season. Every captain in the Caribbean would quickly learn that resistance carried no real cost, and the flag would lose its power almost overnight. So pirate captains protected their reputation with brutal consistency. Crews who fought back and lost were, in a disturbing number of documented cases, shown exactly zero mercy, precisely so that the next ship's captain, hearing the story secondhand in a tavern weeks or months later, would make the safer choice the moment a black flag appeared on his own horizon. This created something close to a self-reinforcing cycle. Word of mouth was, in effect, the marketing department of Golden Age piracy. Sailors in port towns from Nassau to Charleston traded stories constantly, and those stories, often exaggerated with each retelling, the body count climbing a little higher with every new teller, became the actual weapon. A single brutal encounter, retold across a dozen taverns and 100 voyages, could do more strategic work than an entire fleet of warships ever could. Fear, once it took root in the collective imagination of every merchant sailor in the Atlantic trade, needed almost no maintenance at all. It simply spread on its own, carried by men who had never even seen the ship in question, only heard its name spoken in the right tone of voice. Insurance underwriters in London, of all people, became unlikely evidence of how effective this fear campaign truly was. Shipping rates through pirate-heavy waters spiked noticeably during the peak years of the Golden Age, and some merchant companies quietly began budgeting for what amounted to unofficial protection payments, rerouting valuable cargo through longer, safer paths rather than risk the shorter route where a particular captain's flag had recently been spotted. The Jolly Roger was, in a very real economic sense, reshaping trade patterns across an entire ocean without a single naval battle being fought to force that change. By around 1730, the Golden Age of Piracy was effectively over. Naval patrols had multiplied across the Caribbean. Colonial governors offered pardons to any pirate willing to surrender quietly. Merchant convoys began sailing with armed escorts, closing the exact gap in maritime law that had let men like Robertson Blackbeard operate so freely for so long. One by one, the great captains were captured, killed in battle, or simply vanished from the historical record. And yet, the symbol itself refused to die with them. The skull and crossbones went on to appear on poison bottles as a universal warning, on military submarine flags during both world wars as a badge of aggressive pride, and eventually on every piece of pirate-themed entertainment produced for the next 3 centuries. Very few military symbols in human history have managed that kind of staying power. A flag designed by outlaws with no formal army, no government, and no lasting territory of their own, still instantly recognizable to a child on the other side of the planet today. That staying power is, in its own strange way, the final proof of just how effective the original strategy really was. A symbol only survives across centuries if it successfully attached itself to something people never stop fearing. The Jolly Roger didn't just win individual battles in 1720. It won a permanent place in the human imagination as shorthand for danger itself, and that may be the single greatest victory any pirate captain ever achieved, whether he realized it at the time or not. So the Jolly Roger was never just a costume piece or a scrap of old cloth for the history books. It was a tool engineered to win the mind before a single shot could ever be fired at the body. It proved something that most military strategists throughout history eventually learn the hard way. Sometimes the most decisive battle is the one that never actually happens. What do you think? Were the pirates of the Golden Age genuinely brilliant strategists, generations ahead of their time? Or did they simply get lucky again and again until the legend outgrew the truth? Let us know in the comments below. In our next video, we're diving into the story of one pirate captain who single-handedly shook the entire British Empire to its foundations. Until then, stay sharp and stay clear of the black flag on the horizon.